Well, hello again, everybody, for the second time today. Happy Friday. I hope you're all having have had a wonderful week. My camera looks very blurry. So when Sherry comes on, I'm just going to test it to see if it's clean. And yeah, fantastic Friday. And I have with me again the amazing Sherry Sweeney, who has been on with us before, and as well as with Dr. Jerry Marzinski, who for you guys have been watching my channel for a while know he's a regular, yeah. And Sherry has actually written a book with Dr. Jerry Marzinski, and she's an expert on intrusive or invasive thoughts. So amazing to have her on today again. And we're going to be talking about, well, the topic is from the womb to the world, breaking the cycle of trauma. And Sherry and I were just discussing a little bit behind the scenes that this affects everybody, all of us that are watching this, I'm sure, have been in the womb. And that's a very interesting place to be because it's amazing. A lot of my work also centers around understanding the womb. So I look forward to tonight. Hello, everybody. Lisa D, Charmaine, nice to see you ladies again. Thank you for joining. And without any further ado, Sherry, welcome back. Nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Really good, thank you. I'm glad that we finally getting to speak again. I mean, I've had so many in the last month or so, literally a total of 10 days of darkness. No
Oh,
power, no nothing. We were in the middle of storms. So I've had my 10 days of darkness
yeah. Yeah,
that everyone's
it
talking
was
about.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
similar for me the last time we connected, which was in January of this year, and we had a horrible ice storm. So that made a big mess of my place, and the electricity was out, and so we really had the same kind of thing. You had floods, though, right?
Bad ones. One of the worst floods recorded in history in this area.
Oh
Very
my
bad.
goodness.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
oh wow.
Yeah. So lots of damage, lots of people being displaced,
Hmm.
lots of really bad damage. But after the storm comes the calm, and let's see what the storm blew away and what the storm blew in.
Yeah,
So
I'm just really glad you're okay.
I am too. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Hmm.
Tammy just saying there's suspicious weather in Colorado as well. We were definitely under weather attack for sure.
Yeah.
Just all the signs were pointing to that.
Hmm.
But it seems to be a lot at the moment. And interesting as well, for those of you who didn't watch my show on Monday night with Tiffany Anderson, who actually worked for one of the companies that makes the chemicals for this cloud seeding and the mosquito larva. But in order to kill the mosquitoes, they've got to do a whole lot of other environmental stuff to destroy and to understand, how the chemicals split and what they work with in the environment, how they can use them. And of course, weather modification and cloud seeding all goes along with that. So yeah, Tiffany, sorry, not did I say Tammy? Tiffany
Yeah.
Anderson from Monday night. So if you guys haven't seen that, it all goes hand in hand. Anyway, it's just very interesting times we're living in.
The way I see it, the dark side is really stepping up in their attacks because a lot of people are really waking up and finding out who they are, what they're doing, and it's all the truth is starting to come out. So
Absolutely.
that's a really good thing, and I'm really happy to see that. So, but I expect that the dark side is going to fight like any animal, any wild animal that's cornered, um, to try to pull us back in, and that's not going to work this time. It worked before in the ancestral eras, but it's not going to work this time. I don't think it is, and I think there's enough people who are uh, waking up to the idea that okay, so reality isn't what I was told, it isn't what I thought, and so now I know how to look at through all the lies and the disinformation. I don't know perfectly how to tell the difference, but I know that there's a difference. So I think that's really important. Now the thing is, what do we do with that? How did we get here? And my idea is that this all started from the womb. This all started from when we were born. When we were born, we pick up our mother's senses. If they're uncomfortable, if they're stressed out, if they're if they're in war or if they're in crisis or something like that, the child in the womb picks that up. And so then when we're born, depending on what country we're in, but in the United States, most people go to the hospital. And so it's a sterile environment, bright lights, and, sometimes some women have a cesarean section and the child is just pulled out. And then some of them are premature and they're stuck in an incubator, and, lots of needles and probes and medicines and stuff like that are going into them. And they, the child is helpless. They don't know the difference. And so,
Right.
But all of their psyche picks all that stuff up anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now, I can give you an example of my family, which is a kind of a typical template for, I would think, most families in the world. Now, not that the same thing happened in their family as did my family, but it's the whole idea that things are off kilter. Things are not right. They're not like, when we're born. Okay, if you look at animals, they're born in the wild, and their mother is most of the time their mother is very protective, and they hide the child and they keep them comfortable, and they keep them fed, and they keep them warm until they're old enough to fend for themselves. So that's kind of the idea that would be the birth idea that some folks on the planet are looking at, and they have been actually practicing it for decades. But the thing is, most people don't hear about this. But in my research, I found these groups that are doing. There's one group in particular that's particularly interesting, and they're called Birth into Being. Have you heard of them?
No.
Birth into Being. Okay, I guess they originated in Russia as a result of the Cold War ending. And there was a lot of poverty, and people were kind of scattered all over, and the economy was failing, and all this stuff. And so they did. There was a woman who headed this up, and I don't remember her name now. It's a long Russian name. And so she headed this up. She knew that the childbirth is really important to how the person grows up, how they enter this world, how they see reality. And so she started with, a handful of people that were thinking the same way. And so they started having these really natural births, but they had to get their body healthy. They had to get their mind healthy first before they got pregnant. And so that when they did get pregnant, they would be, and the husband had to be there too. The father had to be there too, doing the same thing. So they had to be like a team so that the child would be really nurtured well in the womb. And those people that are born, they're born into the same world that we are, which is all screwed up, but they have a different psyche. They have a different mindset. So they're on a much easier path to see reality as it is. But the rest of us didn't get that. We didn't get that at all. So we came in, we're totally bombarded with unnatural stuff, chemicals put in our body, religions pounding this and pounding that, and training us how to think, training us how to feel. So we're actually trained to go against human nature, in my view.
Yes.
Because human nature is not violent. I came to that conclusion long ago. No, we're not a violent species. We're taught to be violent. We're taught to go against our human nature. And so you look around the world and there it is. The people are going against their nature. They don't know they're going against their nature because they're conditioned, they're trained.
Mm.
And I was trained that way too. I mean, everybody, you were probably trained that way too. So, but eventually, hopefully, a lot of people have realized this and come out of it, and then they're stuck with, okay, so now what do I do? How like, okay, so I've got this training inside of me that teaches me how to not go, how to go against my human nature. So what do I do with that? Well, it's a long road. It's not an overnight success. I mean, I've been working on myself for, 30, 40 years. And so when I first realized this, I'm like, oh, okay, so now what? Well, I had so much trauma inside that I didn't even know about. I was trained to not realize I had a choice. I was trained to not to worship the doctors. I was trained to, do whatever the doctor said, and don't question it. Don't even think. Don't think. Just do. And so I think that most people probably have a flavor of that kind of training. And so this is the stuff that we need to get over. And there are lots of different ways to do it. It depends on the individual. Each and every one of us is unique. So there's no like one solution, which the governments and the controllers of the world think, okay, well, one size fits all, right? So if it works for over here, it's going to work for everybody. That's not true.
Yeah.
So those are my initial thoughts on this, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. So go ahead.
I think it's very interesting, going back to what you were initially saying, and part of my healing that I offer basically is also work very much in the womb, because I do believe the womb is such an important place. Because firstly, I mean, when you look, the baby and the mom are directly connected via the umbilical cord. So every emotion the mom feels, every fear, every panic, every whatever it might be, the fetus takes on as its own, because there is no separation. So I'm not sure about you, but in my situation, I've worked with a lot of people who literally have taken on their mom's emotions, because, of course, as I was saying, they feel them directly. And that in itself is a trauma until later on they learn to separate what's mine and what's hers, right? But also the whole element of womb trauma, because if you think about that, if she's maybe had complications in her pregnancy or 2 or 3 babies before you, every baby had its own unique experience within her womb, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you come along, and not just that, but also the female ancestral line. So the whole feminine, because that is part of the feminine energy, right? And the feminine body. So to understand that that is deeply entrenched in the nervous system of not just women, though, babies. Women will carry it on through the womb, right? If they don't actually shift that. But it's very interesting, because I think it's very important for us to realize as well, because so many times I hear about, oh, I feel just like my mother, or can't stand it, or it's not necessarily that you are the same as her, but very possibly you've taken on and mirroring a lot of what she went through whilst actually pregnant with you as a child. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And the thing is that when you're in the womb and the mother is going through whatever she's going through, let's say she's in a stressful situation with her family for some reason, or she's she's got a whole bunch of children before you, and so they're kind of being hard for her to deal with, and she doesn't have the help that she needs. So that goes into the child, whether it's a male or female. And, you know, I mean, everybody knows we have both male and female within us. And so we're kind of androgynous that way. But then we come out and we are primarily female, or we are primarily male. So that the over the centuries, the female has been not honored at all. Not honored at all. The female has been pushed down, degraded, and not made to feel like they're really something. And so you hear about the divine feminine rising up these days, and okay, so that's a good thing. But what is the divine feminine? The divine feminine and the divine masculine need to come together in balance, and that's not happening. It's happening on some scale, but it's not happening worldwide, not yet. So I think that's
I think because Earth carries, or the planet, if you will, carries our consciousness as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever we're expressing into the world is literally what is there. So for me, what that says, and it's true, because, and this is why when we look at the satanic cult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Baphomet, who's their idol, half male, half female. But again, we know that the Luciferians have inverted everything. So when we flip that around, we got to understand what they're actually mimicking there. They're mimicking exactly the masculine, feminine, androgynous nature of the human spirit, because we spiritually, we do consist of both. We have got that male feel, like the right side of the body is masculine, left side is feminine.
Mm-hmm.
The masculine energy is active, feminine energy is receptive. So that we have both those qualities within us, and that is what the Luciferians try and emulate through Baphomet and these sex changing children at a young age and these atrocious acts that they are doing, right? But I think it's so important that we can recognize that, for starters. I mean, that yes, we have the ability spiritually, right, to be both, but not physically. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's an absolutely good point. And so what I'm seeing in the world is a lot of people are waking up to that. They may not know about the satanic rituals. They may not know about the underlying religious nature of some of the religions on the planet. They may not put together what they're feeling goes into the planet, and that affects Mother Earth. And so they're not really understanding. Some of them are, but I'm kind of just giving an overall view. Some of them they're not really getting the idea that, okay, so if we're having a bad day and we're punching it out and we're furious about this person and that person, and we're blaming this guy and we're blaming that person and that woman or whatever it is, all of those emotions go into the body, but they also go into the planet. And so they affect the planet. And so I've discovered grounding is really, really a positive thing to do whenever you have a chance. And you can do grounding without going into nature. If you can't do that because you're in a high rise or whatever, you can imagine that your grounding goes through all those floors and through the foundation and into the planet. So that's the power of imagination. So that's another topic, that people have imagination, but we're trained not to have that as a child.
Exactly.
You can't have imagination. That's like,
imagining things.
No.
Fairy tale.
Yeah, that's fairy tales. That's not true. That's all. So we came up in that kind of world of first we're in the womb where we're getting bombarded with these negative emotions, and then we get born into this unreal types environment that throws us off. And so we got bright lights shining in our eyes, and needles getting stuck into us, and nurses and doctors that kind of just flip us around. And I mean, I'm not talking about all nurses and all doctors and all places. I'm just talking in general of how things go for a majority of people. So, but then we go home to our parents, who have no idea about reality. They're stuck in their own world, in which they got from their ancestors. So it's a long, long, long trail of abuse and wrong training, and all this stuff that, personally, I think that if we wanted to, we could heal all of that all the way back to the beginning of the ancestral line. But in order to do that, I think we have a job here this time to do that. But first we have to heal ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And we can't ask anybody else to do that for us, because it doesn't work. That's not reality. We can get people to guide us and to help us and to, listen to us when we want to talk things out, and then point out things that we said that might make a difference to us. But keep in mind that every single person is unique. Every single person, if they have a trauma and they tell you that trauma and it was a big, huge deal for them, and you're thinking, well, that's not such a big deal. That wasn't such a huge thing, but it is to them. So that's important. And so, you have to be able to listen to the individual, because I get emails all the time from my website that, talk about, I need some help. I need some guidance. And so I can tell them, here's some guidance. Go read this, go and practice this and do this, and come back to me in 2, 3, 4 weeks and let me know how that's going. Because the thing is, every single person is different. So what I tell people is, if they're writing to me about that, I'll just tell them, go to my website, go to the blog, scroll down, look at where I have, That's a Lie program, 3 parts, and read those and put them into practice. And then if you put them into practice, and don't expect an overnight cure, an overnight healing, but put it into practice, because those intrusive thoughts will eventually go away, but they won't go away right away. I mean, in one case they did, but that's unusual. And I don't know if they ever came back, but I kind of think they probably did. But yeah, so that's what I do with people who write to me. I don't charge anything for this stuff, because I don't have a business, and I don't have a clientele, and I really don't want one, because I'm trying to work on myself. And so, I just, I'm happy to help whoever writes to me, and I can turn them on to our book. And please put the book in the show notes for everybody to go find. I have it both on my website and on Jerry Marzinski's website.
Yeah, all the details and all of that will be in the description area.
Okay, because I would like people to if they're having a big problem with their psyche and their thoughts and their feelings and stuff, and they want to see the background, see the history, see how we got to where we are. A lot of that's in the book, and so that would be helpful. We have it translated into 4 different languages. I think we have it in German, French, Spanish, and
English.
Yeah, and English, of course. Yeah, and so those are the ones that I believe we've got. So we have some offers to get it into some other languages, but that hasn't happened yet. So anyway,
that's amazing. That is really that is so good that you guys have been able to translate that information into so many different languages, and especially a language like Spanish, right? Because that's such a widely spoken language. And I think if more and more people can start understanding that there is a way out, This is not intrusive thoughts or voices in your head. It's not a death sentence or a life sentence. You know, when we start understanding what they are and how powerful we are as human beings, you know, I've been a healer for 30 years. And for me, there's nothing better than watching the human spirit ignite.
Yeah.
It's like I always say, there's that moment I'll be talking to someone, and there's that moment where the light comes on in their eyes and they go, oh, I've got it.
Yeah.
That's the moment for me when you know that's the beginning. That's the beginning. It's not the end. That's only the beginning of a whole new chapter in that person's life. And it's not easy, because walking our way back from the separation from God, our creator, or is never an easy one. We've gotten lost. We've gotten disconnected from the source of our true nature. You know, we've done some abominable things that many of us are ashamed about and guilty. And by nature, we don't want to face that part of our personality or our nature. But we have to, because it's through those actions and through that returning of coherence, as I call it. And, you know, I'm doing the series, the protection patterning series on Solutions with Shanti, where we exactly talk about this, repatterning the nervous system, because it really is the nervous system that has to learn how to be calm and how to reorganize itself in a way that it sees and perceives things in a different way. So it's super exciting at the times we're in right now, because we're seeing so many extremes, right, Sherry? I mean, survivors of the most extreme abuses are now coming out, hundreds of them, hundreds, and hopefully even thousands. I don't want to overplay my hand here, but it's just wonderful for me to see how many people from when we began nearly 6 years ago are speaking up and sharing their stories. And this is how the world is waking up. And it's not an easy, we're waking up to a nightmare. We're not waking up from a nightmare. We've been having our day.
Yeah, we've been living in a nightmare. We're now waking up to that nightmare.
Yeah.
And the thing is, one of the things that I've learned through my religious upbringing, which was not by me. I mean, my parents put me in there, is in the Catholic religion. The first thing you learn is shame, because you're a sinner. You came into this world a sinner. And of course, as a child, you don't know. I mean, you don't have any idea. Here's these authorities, and they're connected to God, right? And they kind of know everything, right? And they tell us that, you know, we're sinners to begin with. Well, turns out that's not true at all. And we got nothing to be ashamed of for just being born. So, and then we get born into this nightmare world where everything you're being taught is backwards. It's actually literally backwards, and it's not true. So that's a tough one to get over. You know, as a child, because as a child, you don't know. You don't know you have a choice, the history.
Exactly. And it's what you were saying, you know, earlier on. We're born from our mom and our dad as well, right? Shame, are you okay, Sherry? You need to get a glass of water. Shame, looks like you're coughing. And our parents and our grandparents really are products of war, aren't they? The First and the Second World Wars, hot on each other's heels kind of thing, right? And there's no such thing as emotional well-being or mental health specialists up until like the 60s, I do believe. Before that, going to see any type of mental health expert meant that you landed up in the psych ward, and that was something that was very, very much something to be ashamed of. It was like you never spoke about that. No one knew. hey, it's fine to go in to have your tonsils out, and if you're dying of cancer or anything else, but let no one know that we're in a mental ward type thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's why I never did go to a psychiatrist when I was getting these intrusive thoughts, because in those days, that would be the exact outcome. I would get put in a mental institution, and then I'd be done. So I'd be given a bunch of drugs, and I didn't want that. So I had enough awareness to not know that. But I think for real, for example, the stigma of having oh, thank you. The stigma of having to admit that you were in a psych ward, that was verboten back in my day. I mean, you would just be shunned. You would never get a job. You would never be, never have any friends. You would never be a member of society. So you just didn't talk about that stuff. You also didn't talk about any abuse that you were going through either, because nobody would believe you anyway. So that's the era that I grew up in. And so, I mean, I had to keep all the stuff that was happening to me to myself until I finally got into this realm that I'm in right now, of working with Jerry and publishing the book and working on myself, and branching out and realizing all kinds of stuff I didn't realize were available. And so now I'm at the point where I guess I'm just starting to live now, which is kind of weird, because here I am in my 80s and I'm just starting to live. And but I have all this background information that I can use to help other people who are in a similar situation. They don't have to be my age. They just have to be, in a wondering, what is reality all about? And I don't have all the answers, but I know that I have some answers, and I have helped a lot of people, and I'm really grateful for that. So that's, I guess that's kind of my goal in life, is to help as many people as possible, just like you are. And, I'm not going to be around here forever. I don't know how long I'll be here, but I'm feeling healthy and good. And, I'm living in a beautiful place. And so, I'm surrounded by nature. So that's wonderful. Not everybody's blessed for that. So I really feel blessed in that regard. So
it makes such a difference. I mean, I grew up on the farm, also nature, no cell phones. I think I was 16 the first time we got a TV. And then it was like only at nighttime when the programs were on. But it really, and I must say, I advocate for this all the time, is to take a walk in nature. Even if you stand on your balcony in the morning and just smell the fresh air, if you, again, in an apartment, if you can, go to the park, take your shoes off. I live close to the beach, so I do a lot of that as well. It's really, really, really good. These are the subtle things that we've actually forgotten. And these are the things that keep us, for sure, connected and balanced, right? In this crazy time of being swept away. And I agree, by the way, Sherry, you look amazing to be in your 80s, really, really. But would you mind, perhaps, just for viewers who haven't heard your previous story, just in a nutshell, maybe just sharing your beginnings and what your experience was growing up?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in 1944. So the World War II had just ended. And so my parents they have an interesting backstory too. So I'm not going to go into that now because it's too long. But so anyway, I was born in a hospital, and the story goes from my parents that I was pulled out of my mother's birth canal with forceps, and so I was all bruised, and my head was all misshapen, and I had no chin, and I was, kind of an ugly baby. And so, but I was healthy, and so eventually I came home, and my mother and dad were having some problems, and so I think when I was 3. They split up, they got divorced, and by then my sister was born. And so the two of us got put into we had to go into an orphanage. But, oh, wait a minute, we didn't go into an orphanage right away. So when I was 6.5, we went into an orphanage. Actually, before we went to the orphanage, we went to a juvenile detention center because there was no room at the orphanage. And so we stayed there 6 months, and we were separated. And I remember waving at her through the window, and she was in a crib because she was too young, too old to be in the baby ward, but she was too young to be in where I was. And I was too young to be where I was too, because the youngest girl was like 12. So I was 6.5, and the youngest girl was 12. Anyway, this was
why did you not go with your mom?
Oh, well, the story, and I don't know this to be true, but the story is that she got tuberculosis. And so she had to get put into what did they call them in those days? A sanitarium, where you stayed for 3 years or something like that to get well. And so they did some major surgery on her, and I think they took out 3/4 of one lung or something like that. But anyway, and so she was in the sanitarium, so she couldn't take care of us, and she didn't want my dad taking care of us, and so we ended up in the orphanage. So we were the only ones in the orphanage who actually had parents. In the orphanage, and I guess I need to back up and tell you that before going to the orphanage, my dad was he admired the Japanese torture system because of the war. And he was studying up on that. And so he wanted me to be like his guinea pig and test me on some of the torture methods. And so, I was just like really little. I was like 3 maybe when it started. And so I'm like, he was like, can you help daddy out? Because I have these experiments I want to do. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll help you. Sure, I'll do anything, right? Because I what did I know? So I went through, he was like very clinical, and he wore his white coat, and he had a clipboard, and he was taking notes while we were doing these experiments, and I was screaming my head off. And, I ended up leaving my body to avoid the pain. It just happened. It was a spontaneous thing. And then after the sessions were over, he would put me on his lap and rock me and say, oh, you're such a good girl. Thank you so much for doing this stuff. So I was like, I got the message of, if you want love, you have to be tortured first.
Sure.
That was the message I got as a young child. So that must be a big time.
I'm sorry. I remember you telling that story before, and I was so traumatized just listening to.
Oh, wow.
No, seriously, because here's your father. I mean, he's not even like he's a vicious brute or sort of a SRA psychopath, doing all sorts of. But there he is, having a fascination for Japanese torture methods, and decides to use his daughter as a guinea pig.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean,
and then rocking me to praise me for doing such a good job.
Exactly.
I never told him how I left my body because, that was just private. That was my private escape place that I went to throughout childhood. When I got into a situation that it was just unbearable, I would go to that place in my mind or leave my body. And it was a sanctuary for me. And it kind of looked like the background in my.
Yeah. Funny enough, I had that feeling. And I thought, I'm sure she was like that.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing with us what type of things he was doing to you? I mean, you don't have to go into any detail, but maybe just
Um,
touch on a few.
well, as a 3-year-old, I'm really little. And so the very first test was holding a glass of water in each hand with my hands, really stuck out wide, and holding it there, and not spilling a drop, because the consequences would be dire, I was told. So after you do this, just putting your hands out like this with nothing in them, over time, your arms start getting pretty heavy, right? So here I was holding a glass of water in each hand, and my arms were getting real tired, and my neck was hurting, and just all kinds of stuff like that. So I started crying and screaming to stop, and he was like, "No, no, no, just wait a minute, a few more minutes. I'll tell you when." He didn't seem to mind that I was going through some torture. I think that was probably the test to see what I could take. Okay, so that was the first time. So I thought, okay, well, so that wasn't too bad. It was painful, and I was crying, and I was, begging him to stop. And so finally he stopped, and I put my arms down, and then he rocked me later on, blah, blah, blah. So then the next one was, putting needles under my fingernails, and to see how far it would go before I was in too much pain. And he never put them all the way through, but he put them to where it was really, really painful. So my nails turned out okay. They were kind of screwed up for a while, but then they came out okay over time. And he would patch me up, take care of the bleeding, and patch me up and stuff like that. And then another one was, I would sit in a chair. He pulled me out of bed in the middle of the night, and then plop me in this hardwood chair, and then I would sit there, and he would read from a book of like mathematics and architecture and engineering, and because he was an architect and by trade. And so he would read from those books, and these were onion skin paper thin books, kind of the Bible that people read when they're studying those courses. So he would read this stuff to me, and of course I had no idea what any of that meant. And in the meantime, I had these thoughts coming into my mind of how I could get even with him, and how I could punish him, and I could, then I would stare at him and turn his face really, really tiny. And so that was kind of my energy, because I couldn't close my eyes. I couldn't go to sleep. That was the rule. So that was a form of torture. I mean, that was difficult for me to do. So I found ways to entertain myself to, okay, so I'm going to turn him into an orange head. I couldn't listen to his words because it didn't make any sense. So I would just stare at him, and finally his head would get real tiny, and then I'd make it big again. And then I'd get these thoughts in my head of how to get even with him and how to punish him. And I was arguing with these, mentally arguing with this stuff. All this stuff was going on while he's just sitting there reading. So, yeah. And then one time, this happened frequently. But one time I was sitting there, and the thoughts got so bad, and I was arguing. And then I guess I forgot that I was doing this mentally, and I just yelled out, stop. I don't want to hear you anymore. And my dad just backhanded me across the room, and I flew across the room and hit the fireplace brick, and I didn't hurt anything. I didn't break anything. I didn't even bleed. It's just I hit so hard. And then he just said, go on to bed. So I went to bed, went to my room, and I was sitting on the floor, and I was saying to the universe, I don't want to do this again. Not meaning the actual thing that I didn't want to do this life again, because I felt like this was a repeat. And I think I was like 3 or 4 years old at the time. I just kind of knew that this was a repeat. And yeah, and then of course I climbed into bed and went to sleep. So yeah, those are some examples of what was going on. And yeah, there was a
Wow.
lot of bleeding and a lot of injuries and stuff like that he doctored up very carefully, very professionally. And then he'd put me on his lap and rock me and tell me what a brave girl I was. So that was my lesson in those days. So yeah. So then we got sent to the orphanage, and my sister and I were separated again. And she went in because they grouped everybody by age. So there was like the Pixie group was her group, I think, and then mine was the Brownie group, and then there was the Bluebirds. Something. These were girls that were like from infants to 18, and it was a Catholic orphanage run by the nuns. So that's where I got all my religious information from those nuns. And they were totally brainwashed. They were totally, superstitious. And so I had an awakening when I was like 9 years old in the orphanage. We had a rule that you never went to communion unless you went to confession first. Because if you ever went to communion without going to confession, God would strike you dead right there. So, of course, we believed it. And the day came when I was out playing, and I think it was on a Friday. That was the confession day. And I forgot the time. I forgot, I had to go to confession. And so here comes Sunday, and I'm sitting in the pew, and I'm like, oh God, I didn't go to confession. So, what am I going to do? If I go to communion without going to confession, God's going to strike me dead. And if I don't, the nurses are going to know I didn't go to confession, and I'll be in serious trouble. I was so afraid of those nuns that I decided to take my chances with God. So I went up to the pew, took confession, just waited. Okay, strike me dead. And I was very sincere. I know it sounds silly now, but at the time I was totally sincere. And nothing happened. So I looked up at all the statues and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, well, maybe he's busy, because he's got all these people to bring home or whatever. And so, I just didn't know. And nothing happened. And so finally I just thought to myself, okay, so that was a lie. The nuns told us a lie. God doesn't strike little girls dead when they do this stuff. So I got up and I had this, kind of grin on my face. Wasn't really smile. I was trying to hold it back, but I had this feeling of, I know something you don't know. You lied to us, and I want to know what else you've lied to us about. And I couldn't tell the other girls because I knew that they would go tell the nuns. And so I had to keep that to myself. So everything I did had to be kept to myself.
Right.
So that's kind of the story.
Well, it's amazing, when you also just speaking about your dad and the torture and the dissociation that you experienced then and what that was like for you. And exactly, as you're saying, having these ideas of taking revenge on him. And I'm sure that is absolutely 100% had an effect on your life throughout, right? Throughout.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
Well, the irony is he wasn't a bad guy. He was a sick guy. He had strange ideas. And in all my studies, I've come to realize that he and my mother and their families and all the way back, they're all victims of this stuff that we're talking about from the womb and from the training that we get when we get here onto the planet.
Yeah.
So, there's really nothing to blame. There's nothing to accuse. And in fact, I think if I hadn't gone through that stuff, I probably wouldn't be realizing the things I'm realizing today.
Right.
So I wouldn't be able to tell anybody what I've learned. Okay. So
Totally.
yeah, so that turns out to be a good thing, which sounds a little strange, but I
Mm.
wouldn't want to do it again. I wouldn't want to do it again. But the fact that it happened and I got over it and I learned so much about the human condition and the
Mhm.
planet and reality and the ancestors and the dark side and the archons. I mean, I would just the whole thing comes to this crescendo of okay, here's what's going on, and now I can tell other people and maybe I can help them out.
I really believe, things happen in mysterious ways for reasons. And it's exactly what you say. Only through your experience could you have that first-hand knowledge and share that with people, because there's no doubt in my mind, especially not, I mean, after seeing what happens in the underbelly of the world, right? And as you say, so many sick people. And I think that's what I was saying earlier on, is that we are all just products of the war. Men that have been so traumatized
Mhm.
at such a young age, seeing things that no human being should see, coming back so shell shocked and PTSD. Now they're marrying women and trying to raise well balanced kids, right? And
Right.
of course, the women would be products of their mothers who then had to take on this poverty and trauma and running the entire country, basically,
Mhm.
system while their husbands are away. And, the challenges that faces. So it's nothing but hardship and heaviness that really has been. And it's through our experiences of remembering who we are as humans that we can heal through those traumas.
Mhm.
And I really thank you, Sherry, for being here. And I know I can hear your voice is starting to give you some issues. So I'm not going to keep you much longer, but I really just want to say thank you for sharing your story with us and with the world, and just for being such an amazing guide and inspiration for people who are going through something similar.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm only one person of a whole bunch of people on this planet who are waking up and
Mm,
learning things, and then once they learn it, they can turn around and help other people understand.
totally.
So that's
Mm,
how this goes. Nobody gets to be the ruler. Nobody gets to be in charge. Nobody's doing the healing for you. You
you're
have to,
doing it
you have
yourself.
to do it yourself. But you
Right.
might be guided of okay, if I hear you and I get your message correctly and it jives with you, then I can help you. If I hear you and I'm not the one to be doing this for you, then of course it's somebody else that's going to do it for you. So there's no shame, there's no blame, there's no attachment to the outcome, and so people are free to choose whoever they benefit from the best. And
Exactly.
yeah, and so then now this is I know I live in the United States, and so I'm a little bit you know cocooned there. I haven't been a world traveler, but I have traveled a little bit. And so I've traveled around the country for sure. And I've traveled over to the Bahamas and Virgin Islands and stuff like that. I've traveled to Mexico. I've traveled to Canada. So I know a little bit about those areas. But when I look at people who are genuine, like you from South Africa, and and then I read about the tribes and I read about the ancient history and stuff like that. Now, history is that's another topic. We've been lied to a lot about history. The dark side
Mm,
has really done its best to cover all this stuff up because they don't want us to know who we are. They definitely don't want us to remember who we are, but it's too late. People
mm,
are actually remembering. It's like
mm.
um, I heard the other day this. I've been looking at a lot of stuff for a long time, but there was a program I watched the other day, um, and it was about how our emotions and how our reactions and how our thoughts and feelings affect energetically the planet. Okay, and how our uh, controllers, would-be controllers, they're materialistic. They don't have any idea about spirit. So they get this ancient technology, for example, and they're going to make it work, and they're going to control everything, and they're going to do all this stuff, and they don't have any spirit involved. So this is what they had in Atlantis and in Lemuria.
Right.
So the dark side came and they found it. They pushed it to the limits, and guess what? Everything sunk. Okay, so now are they going to do that again? I don't think so. Not this time, because I don't think we're going to let them. I don't really think we're going to let them.
There's enough of us that are waking up and have woken up. This new hantavirus thing they tried to pin on us 2 weeks ago. I mean, what a joke. I mean, it's ridiculous. So again, it's not working. We're laughing at them now, and they're well aware of that.
Yeah, they are. And so the thing is, now the dark side, what I call the archons, now maybe somebody else has some other names for them, and that's okay. But they are the dark side, the ones that came with the, one of the stories that I really like, one of the creation stories I really like is the Sophia story, because it makes so much sense. And this is a Gnostic creation story. So Sophia comes from the pleroma, the original, where the source is. So where the source begins. And so they call that the pleroma. And so this is where these beings are. They have no ego. They're just pure essence. Okay, so then this one essence, she's the female. The wisdom is what Sophia stands for in Greece, I think. Anyway, so she decides that she wants to see if there's anything else. She wants to, expand her knowledge. And so she goes off on her own, which is kind of always been against the rules for millennia. This is just the story. So, and then she travels around the universe, and she comes across this planet that has these archons on them. The archons didn't know she existed. They didn't know anything existed except for themselves. And so they figured they were God, because they didn't know anything. And so anyway, so she runs into them, and she's, oh my God, what's this? And so then she gets all tangled up with that and all this stuff. And there's this big fight. I'm paraphrasing, but anyway, so she comes and she turns into Mother Earth. She becomes Mother Earth to birth this planet, to birth this solar system, to birth, our existence. Okay, so that's what the Gnostics show. Now, the Native Indians have a whole different story, but they all say the same thing. There's always this beginning, that branches out and becomes Mother Earth and becomes, the central figure. So if we can look at any creation story we want, and we can believe it however we believe it, and I think that's fine. I happen to favor the Gnostic story, because there's so much in there that kind of jives with what I experienced myself, like the archons. And there was an interview that Jerry had when his book first came out with Jay Widener, who speaks about the archons a lot. He's a filmmaker and an author and a podcaster, and so I don't know if you know him or not, but anyway, he's a good guy. He's kind of my age. I guess he's up there like the rest of us are. Anyway, so he has this interview with Jerry about the book, and then he decides to I asked Jerry to ask him to write the foreword for the book. And so he did. And in that foreword, he talks about that it's so amazing that Jerry Marzinsky came to the conclusions he came to, and he didn't even know about the archons. He didn't know the archons existed. So, but Jerry came to the conclusion that the voices in people's heads were not a function of their brain. It was nothing like that. It was an outside entity who was taking control. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I realized that too before I even met Jerry. So that's kind of how we connected, was, exchanging stories like that. So the archons are, now there's a lot of books about the archons. They're called different names, but their biggest fear is to be discovered. So humanity is discovering the archons now, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So that's why they're fighting back so hard.
Big kicking, exactly. It's the kicking, scrambling to get away and taking all you can before you go, or hide and fight back. Well,
The thing is, they have no power of their own. They have no
mhm,
power of their own. They only have the power that we give them.
for sure.
So if we give them our power, their power grows.
Hmm.
So that's the importance of realizing how we've been so duped as a humanity, as a species, from birth, from the womb, from the moment that we arrived. We've been duped and we've been programmed to not know that the archons exist, or to not know that the dark side even exists, and to not even know that we're who we are. So we're just like human beings and running around and learning computers and doing all this stuff, and killing people and whatever we're doing. And then all of a sudden we start to realize, wait a minute, that's not me. That's really not me.
Mm.
And there starts the journey. There starts the
Mm.
question.
Exactly. And I think it begins for us now with a wake up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Lovely. Sherry, thank you so, so very much for joining me again. And I really always find it so interesting talking to you, and would love to have you back again sometime in the future.
Okay.
And we can catch up again on other stuff. Shame, I hope your throat's okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no shame. Is there anything you'd like to share with our viewers? Any shows you're doing? Where can they get hold of you? And just by the way, all Sherry's details are in the description area below as well.
Yeah, my website is keyholejourney.com, and on that I would recommend that just spend some time browsing around. It's not laid out like a normal website because there's so much information on there. And especially go to the blog and browse around there, because I've been keeping up with ideas and tossing them out and stuff like that in the blogs. And then, and of course, if you go to the blog, if you're interested in the That's a Lie program, there's 3 parts to it. So I've listed those underneath the blog.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining me on this lovely Friday. And I shall see you not this weekend again, but again on Monday. So tune in then, and I hope you have an amazing weekend. Sherry, thank you very much again for joining me as well. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And we look forward to having you back on with us again in the future.
Okay. I look forward to it too. Thank you for inviting me today. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Really good to see you again.
Mm-hmm.
Take care, everybody. Stay cool and just stay calm.